For 18 years I kept their financial records immaculate. Then the new CEO told me my services were no longer required and pushed a termination agreement across the conference table. "Sign this and walk away," she said, her voice dripping with dismissal. I smiled, pulled out my pen, added one handwritten clause exactly as my founding contract permitted, and signed my name. The following morning, the company's legal counsel stormed into the executive suite, ashen-faced and trembling. "Why did she just activate the original equity provision? What have you made her sign?" The CEO said nothing. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached." Everything changed on November 14th, 2025 at 4:23 in the afternoon when I added 9 handwritten words to a termination document that nobody had bothered to examine properly. "My name is Zoe Ellis and I'm 56 years old. For exactly 18 years, from November 1st, 2007 to November 14th, 2025, I served as the financial controller and senior accounting executive at Cascade Technologies, a software development and IT consulting firm based in Portland, Oregon. I began my tenure when Cascade operated with 19 employees and generated $3.8 million in yearly revenue. By 2025, our workforce had expanded to 278 people, with revenue reaching $243 million annually. I constructed every financial protocol from the ground up, established relationships with 7 different banking institutions, supervised 14 external audits, and maintained accounting records so pristine that the Oregon Department of Revenue cited our documentation as exemplary during state compliance conferences. But the actual reason I held significance, the reason nobody comprehended until everything unraveled, was concealed in Article 14, subsection 3 of my original 2007 employment agreement. A provision the founders had personally drafted. A stipulation granting me protections nobody recalled existed. A clause that would ultimately cost the company $38 million when an arrogant CEO forced my hand and made me invoke it. The genuine story begins in August 2007, when Cascade Technologies existed only as an ambitious concept. Back then, it was 4 individuals working from a shared office space in Northwest Portland. Raymond Cascade, 63 years old, a veteran software architect with 35 years of experience building enterprise systems for Fortune 500 companies. His daughter, Elizabeth Cascade, 38, a project manager who'd spent 12 years at IBM managing multimillion-dollar implementations. Elizabeth's business school classmate, Jonathan Wright, 40, an entrepreneur with extensive connections throughout Silicon Valley. And Jonathan's sister, Caroline Wright, 37, a marketing strategist who'd helped launch 3 successful tech startups. They had developed a vision: create a boutique consulting firm specializing in custom enterprise software solutions for mid-sized manufacturing and logistics companies. Premium service, personalized attention, exceptional results. They possessed Raymond's technical expertise, Elizabeth's operational knowledge, Jonathan's business network, Caroline's marketing acumen, and exactly $412,000 in combined capital to launch the venture. What they lacked was someone who understood accounting principles, tax regulations, financial compliance, cash flow forecasting, or how to manage the fiscal operations of an emerging business. They'd attempted hiring a contract bookkeeper, a local accountant charging $42 hourly, but he'd committed errors that resulted in a $68,000 penalty from the IRS for improper revenue recognition. That's where I entered the picture. In August 2007, I was 38 years old, employed as a senior financial analyst at a regional technology firm, earning $68,000 per year. I held a CPA certification, 13 years of professional experience, and a reputation for identifying financial discrepancies that others consistently overlooked. I felt professionally stagnant, financially undervalued, and desperately seeking something more substantial. Raymond Cascade approached me at a Pacific Northwest Technology Conference on August 19, 2007. He introduced himself, described his startup concept, and inquired whether I'd consider joining as their founding financial officer. "What's the compensation?" I asked directly. $60,000 to start. "I realize that represents a reduction from your current earnings, but we're providing something additional." He handed me a preliminary employment contract, 27 pages containing standard provisions about responsibilities, health benefits, paid time off. But attached at the conclusion was Article 14, Founder Protections and Equity Participation. I read every word carefully. Very carefully. Article 14, subsection 3 was particularly compelling. Asterisk employee is designated as a founding financial executive and granted founder protections equivalent to founding partners. In the event of employee's involuntary termination without documented cause, or voluntary resignation accompanied by complete settlement of all outstanding financial obligations and compensation owed to employee shall receive immediate vesting of 4% equity ownership in the company, calculated at fair market valuation at time of employment separation. Asterisk. Let me translate that into straightforward language. If they terminated me without legitimate cause, or if I resigned while demanding complete settlement of everything they owed me, I would immediately own 4% of the company at whatever value it held when I departed. In 2007, when Cascade generated zero revenue and employed 4 people in a shared office space, 4% was worth perhaps $12,000. Not transformative money. But the clause contained no maximum threshold. It specified 4% at fair market valuation at time of separation. If the company grew to be valued at $100 million, my 4% was worth $4 million. If the company reached $1 billion in value, my 4% was worth $40 million. There was no ceiling, no restriction, just 4% of whatever Cascade was worth when I triggered the provision. Why are you offering this? I asked Raymond. He looked at me with complete seriousness. Because I'm 63 years old. I've been betrayed by financial professionals before. I've witnessed talented people build companies only to be discarded by corporate executives who prioritize quarterly reports over human loyalty. I want someone who will demonstrate genuine commitment to this organization, who will maintain honest financial records, who will remain here for the duration. This clause makes you a founding partner in everything except title. You'll have genuine investment in our success. You'll protect us because protecting us protects your future. And if we achieve a lucrative sale, you become wealthy alongside us. 4% of the sale proceeds. That seems equitable. I contemplated the offer for 5 days. On August 24, 2007, I called Raymond. I'm accepting. But I want one modification to Article 14. What modification? Subsection 3 states I can trigger the equity by demanding complete settlement of all outstanding obligations. I want the contract to specify that I retain the right to add handwritten amendments to any termination or separation document that clarify what constitutes complete settlement, and that any such handwritten amendment signed by both parties becomes legally enforceable. Raymond remained silent for a long moment. Why? Because if some future executive attempts to force me out with a pre-written termination agreement, I want the explicit right to modify it to protect my interests. I want it documented that I can add handwritten provisions and that those provisions are binding. Raymond laughed. A genuine appreciative laugh. You're thinking like a founder already. Agreed. The final version of Article 14, subsection 3 included this additional language. Asterisk employee retains the explicit right to add handwritten modifications to any termination or separation agreement, provided such modifications are initialed by both parties. Any separation agreement containing the phrase, complete settlement of obligations or substantially similar language shall be interpreted as triggering employees' founder protections and immediate equity vesting unless specifically disclaimed in writing by both parties. Asterisk. I signed the contract on November 1, 2007. Raymond, Elizabeth, Jonathan, and Caroline all signed as witnesses. The document was notarized and filed with the company's incorporation records with the Oregon Secretary of State. I began work on November 5, 2007, in an 800-square-foot office space in the Pearl District. My first assignment: rectify 9 months of accounting catastrophes. By January, I'd submitted corrected tax filings, negotiated installment agreements with federal and state revenue agencies, and established proper double-entry bookkeeping systems. Over the subsequent 18 years, I constructed Cascade's entire financial infrastructure. 2008. Implemented Sage accounting software, hired our first accounts payable specialist, established net 30 payment terms with vendors. 2010. navigated the company through the recession by managing cash reserves down to the dollar during 18 consecutive months of declining revenue. 2012. Negotiated our first substantial credit facility, $1.5 million, by presenting 6 years of flawless financial documentation. 2014. Managed our first strategic acquisition, a competitor generating $6.2 million in annual revenue. 2016. Guided the company through its first comprehensive external audit in preparation for a potential sale that we ultimately declined. 2019. Implemented a new enterprise resource planning system, financially integrating 4 separate business divisions. 2021. Oversaw financial operations during our expansion into cloud services, which added $87 million in new revenue streams. 2025. Supervised financial operations for $243 million in revenue across 6 regional offices. By 2025, I was earning $172,000 annually, managing a finance department of 9 professionals, and had been offered the CFO position on 4 separate occasions. I declined each time because I preferred hands-on financial management to executive boardroom politics. More significantly, I'd never forgotten about Article 14, subsection 3. Every single year, I retrieved my original employment contract and reread every provision. I maintained 1 copy at home in a fireproof document safe. I kept another copy with my attorney. I verified annually that the clause remained valid under current corporate bylaws. Because I'd always known, that eventually someone would attempt to eliminate me. That day arrived on August 7, 2025, when Raymond Cascade passed away. Raymond was 81 years old, still visiting the office twice weekly, still reviewing major client contracts, still the philosophical heart of Cascade Technologies. He died from complications of pneumonia on August 6 while recovering from what should have been routine surgery. The memorial service was August 11. The entire company attended, 278 employees, dozens of clients and partners, family and friends spanning 4 decades. I delivered a remembrance about how Raymond had taught me that ethical financial management was the cornerstone of any enduring business. Elizabeth Cascade, now 56, became chairwoman of the board. Jonathan Wright, 58, remained as president. Caroline Wright, 55, continued as chief marketing officer. But they were exhausted. The company had grown beyond their capacity to manage day-to-day operations effectively. They wanted to retire, travel extensively, spend quality time with their children and grandchildren. On August 27, 2025, the board announced they'd hired a new chief executive officer to assume operational leadership. Natalie Foster, 41 years old, Stanford MBA, previously a senior vice president at a venture capital firm specializing in technology acquisitions. Every alarm bell in my mind started ringing immediately. Natalie began September 1, 2025. Her first action was contracting an external consulting group, Peak Strategic Consulting, to conduct an operational efficiency assessment. Cost, $395,000. I challenged this expenditure during the September 6 Executive Committee meeting. Natalie, we just completed our annual strategic review in July. What specifically are we analyzing that we don't already understand? She smiled with cold precision. Zoe, when was the last time independent experts evaluated our operations? We have annual external financial audits from KPMG. We have quarterly board performance reviews. I'm discussing operational efficiency, not financial compliance. Peak specializes in identifying cost reduction opportunities in technology companies. Translation. They specialize in terminating expensive senior employees and replacing them with cheaper, less experienced workers. The consultants arrived September 15. 4 Yale MBAs in their late 20s with minimal technology industry experience. They spent 5 weeks interviewing department directors, reviewing organizational structures, analyzing compensation data relative to market benchmarks. On October 22, they presented findings to the board. I wasn't invited to the presentation, first warning sign, but I heard about it from Elizabeth Cascade, who called me that evening, her voice tight with anger. Zoe, the consultants recommended eliminating several senior positions, including yours. They claim your role could be outsourced to a contract financial services firm for 35% less cost. Elizabeth, that's absurd. A contract firm doesn't understand our systems, our client billing structures, our regulatory requirements specific to government contracts. I know. I argued strenuously against it. Jonathan argued. Caroline argued. But Natalie convinced the board that modernization requires difficult personnel decisions. They're going to force you out. What about my contract? Article 14, subsection 3. Long heavy silence. What's Article 14? My founder equity clause. If they terminate me without documented cause, I receive 4% of the company at current fair market valuation. Zoe, what's the company worth currently? I'd been monitoring this carefully, religiously you might say. Not out of paranoia but out of professional duty. As Cascade's financial controller, I wasn't just responsible for maintaining clean books. I was the custodian of our enterprise value. That meant tracking every whisper of market interest, every term sheet, every valuation benchmark that crossed our legal or M&A advisors' desks. Over the past 14 months, Cascade had received 4 unsolicited acquisition proposals. The first came in September 2024 from a mid-tier private equity firm specializing in SaaS infrastructure. $850 million all cash with a modest earnout tied to cloud revenue retention. We declined. The founders weren't ready. Raymond was still walking the halls twice a week, reviewing contracts with the same sharp eye he'd used in 2007. Then in January 2025, a Canadian data logistics conglomerate offered $910 million, mostly stock with a 3-year lockup. Too risky, too illiquid. In April, a strategic bidder, our largest client, ironically, proposed $940 million, contingent on retaining key leadership including me. That one stung. They knew my role was irreplaceable. But again the board hesitated. Elizabeth, Jonathan, and Caroline still believed they could grow Cascade independently, perhaps IPO in 2027. The final offer arrived in late August 2025, just days after Raymond's passing. A Silicon Valley growth fund, flush with capital and hungry for cash flow positive tech assets, proposed $975 million, clean and unconditional. The timing felt predatory. And the board, grieving and disoriented, tabled it indefinitely. Still, those offers created an undeniable market signal. Cascade Technologies' fair market value sat between $850 million and $975 million. Consensus among our auditors and valuation consultants? $900 million, give or take. Conservative, defensible, and consistent with revenue multiples for companies of our profile. $243 in annual revenue, 22% EBITDA margin, 0 debt, and a pristine compliance record. So when Elizabeth asked, voice tight over the phone, Zoe, what's the company worth currently? I didn't hesitate. 4% of $900 million is $36 million, Elizabeth. A sharp intake of breath. Jesus. Does Natalie know about this? I don't know, I said. Does anyone still have copies of the 2007 employment contracts? Silence. Then weary, I don't know. Raymond managed that documentation. After he died, we've been struggling to organize 18 years of corporate records. Half the physical files are still in his office. HR migrated digital contracts in 2018, but they only scan the main body, not the exhibits or addenda. Exactly, I thought. That was the fatal flaw in every hasty restructuring. The assumption that institutional memory lives in cloud folders. But real memory, the kind that protects people, lives in signed originals, in notarized clauses, in the margins of decisions made with integrity. Then they probably don't know, I said. Which means when they attempt to terminate me, I'll invoke the clause and it'll cost them $36 million. Elizabeth exhaled slowly. Can you just not invoke it? Accept a severance package? Leave peacefully. I closed my eyes. 18 years flashed before me. Nights spent reconciling intercompany transactions during acquisition integrations, weekends drafting SOX-compliant controls, the quiet pride of seeing our audit reports stamped "no exceptions noted." I'd turned down roles at Oracle, SAP, even the Big Four, offers that promised $220,000 base stock options, relocation to Palo Alto. I stayed because Cascade was my legacy too. Elizabeth, I said evenly, I've dedicated 18 years of my professional life to this company. I've declined 8 offers from competitors offering 20 to 40% higher compensation. I've maintained your financial records so impeccably that the Oregon Department of Revenue cited us as a benchmark during statewide compliance workshops. I've saved this company millions through careful cash management. Remember the 2010 recession? I kept us solvent on $38,000 in monthly reserves for 18 months. And now some consultant who's been here 5 weeks wants to terminate me to save $68,000 in annual salary. I paused. My voice didn't rise, but it hardened like forged steel. No. If they want me gone, they're paying exactly what my contract stipulates I'm owed. She sighed deeply. I understand completely. I'll try to prevent this, but Natalie has convinced the board she knows what she's doing. She couldn't prevent it. On November 14, 2025 at 3:58 p.m., Natalie's executive assistant sent an Outlook calendar invite. Personnel discussion, Zoe Ellis, 4:15 p.m., executive conference room. No agenda. No HR rep listed. Just cold, procedural finality. I arrived at 4:14. Natalie sat at the head of the polished walnut table in a $3,000 Loro Piana suit. Her posture radiating authority she hadn't earned through contribution, only through title. Before her lay a burgundy leather portfolio, embossed with the Cascade logo. Zoe, please sit. I sat. She didn't offer water. Didn't thank me for my service. I'll be direct. We've decided to restructure financial operations. Your position is being eliminated. We're outsourcing accounting functions to Deloitte's Managed Services division. Your final day is December 15th. This portfolio contains your termination agreement. She slid it across. I opened it methodically, page by page, clause by clause. 10 weeks severance. $33,154 gross. Health insurance for 60 days. Standard release of claims. Non-disparagement. Confidentiality. All boilerplate, all designed to silence, not compensate. Then I saw it. At the bottom of page 4, just above the signature lines. Employee acknowledges this agreement constitutes complete settlement of obligations between employee and company. My pulse didn't quicken. My hands didn't shake. After 18 years, I'd trained myself for moments like this. Because those 6 words, complete settlement of obligations, were the trigger phrase. Article 14. Subsection 3 had defined them explicitly as the condition that activated my founder equity vesting. Natalie had no idea. She'd copied language from a generic HR template, blind to the landmine buried in my 2007 contract. I pulled my pen, a black Uniball Signo, the same model I'd used to sign my original agreement. Clicked it once. Deliberately. Natalie, I have one small modification. This isn't negotiable, Zoe. Sign or don't sign. If you don't sign by 5 o'clock today, we proceed with involuntary termination for cause, and you receive nothing. I understand. Just one small addition. My contract permits handwritten modifications to termination agreements. She waved a dismissive hand. Fine. Make it quick. In clear, legible cursive I wrote. Pursuant to Article 14, Section 3 of Employment Agreement dated November 1, 2007, employee invokes founder protections and equity vesting at 4% of fair market valuation. I initialed, then signed, Zoe R. Ellis. Natalie barely glanced. She signed with a flourish, Natalie Foster CO, dated it and closed the portfolio. Done. HR will process your final compensation. You can work through December 15th or leave immediately. Your choice. I'll work through December 15th, I said. I want to ensure proper transition documentation. She nodded, already scrolling through emails. At 4:23 I walked out with the portfolio. Drove straight to Stephanie Chen's office. Employment law specialist, my attorney since 2013, and the only person I trusted with nuclear-level discretion. By 6:15 p.m. we'd made 4 copies. One for my fireproof safe. One for Stephanie's encrypted case file. One for my safe deposit box at Umpqua Bank. One filed with the Multnomah County Clerk's office as a precautionary exhibit. Zoe, Stephanie said, adjusting her glasses, this is either brilliant or catastrophic. You just triggered a $36 million payout based on an 18-year-old clause that no one at Cascade has seen since Barack Obama's first term. Let them discover it themselves, I said. Give them 1 business day. If they don't, we send the demand letter tomorrow at 9 a.m. That night I lay awake. Not from anxiety, but from memory. Raymond's voice in that Pearl District office in 2007. I've been betrayed by financial professionals before. I want someone who'll stay. Someone who'll protect us because protecting us protects their future. He'd understood a truth modern executives forget. Loyalty must be contractually reciprocal. At 9:03 a.m. November 15th, I was reconciling Q4 cloud revenue when the shouting began. Who authorized this? Who allowed her to sign this? Jonathan Wright's roar echoed through the finance wing. He burst in, face crimson, the signed termination agreement crumpled in his fist. Zoe. My office. Immediately. We passed Natalie's office. She was on the phone, pale, gripping the edge of her desk, hands trembling. In Jonathan's office, he slammed the door so hard a photo of the 2014 team retreat fell off the wall. What the hell did you do? I signed a termination agreement as requested. You added a clause. Something about Article 14 and founder protections and 4% equity. That's correct, I said calmly. Article 14, subsection 3 of my employment contract, dated November 1, 2007. Natalie's agreement stated it was complete settlement of obligations, the exact trigger phrase. I invoked my right as permitted. She signed it. It's binding. Do you comprehend what that clause means? 4% of fair market valuation. $900 million. That's $36 million. $36 million. You're claiming we owe you $36 million. I'm not claiming anything, Jonathan. Natalie signed an acknowledgement of it. That makes it legally enforceable. This is insane. We offered you $33,000. Generous given the circumstances. Generous. I met his eyes. After 18 years of flawless audits, recession navigation, acquisition integrations, and systems that run like clockwork? After I turned down every headhunter who called? That offer wasn't generous. It was insulting. Article 14 was designed for exactly this. To protect founding contributors from executives who value cost-cutting over loyalty. Raymond is deceased. His contract provisions aren't. They're filed with the Oregon Secretary of State. They're part of the company's foundational governance. And now. I paused. They're enforceable. Jonathan stared at me, jaw working. He wasn't angry at me, he was furious at the system that allowed this to happen. At the arrogance that assumed legacy could be erased with a Deloitte invoice. And in that moment I knew, the board would pay. Not because they wanted to, but because contracts are promises written in law, and Raymond Cascade had insisted all those years ago that promises to loyal people must be kept, even when the people who made them are gone. Jonathan stared at me, jaw clenched so tight I could see the tendon flex beneath his skin. His eyes, once warm with the kind of camaraderie forged over 18 years of shared deadlines, audit emergencies and late-night client rescues, were now clouded with panic and something far more dangerous, denial. We'll fight this, he said, voice low but trembling with suppressed fury. We'll tie this up in litigation for years. You think a court is going to enforce a clause like that today? In this economy? After everything that's changed? I didn't flinch. I'd rehearsed this moment in my mind 100 times, not out of paranoia but out of professional discipline. When you've built a company's financial backbone from scratch, you learn that every system has a stress test. This was mine. And I'd designed it to hold. You'll lose, I said, calm and measured. Article 14 is part of my employment contract, filed with the Oregon Secretary of State alongside Cascade's original incorporation documents in 2007. It was signed not just by Raymond but by you, Elizabeth and Caroline as witnesses. Notarized. Duly recorded. And for 18 years the company operated under its terms without amendment. Natalie's termination agreement explicitly states it constitutes complete settlement of obligations, the exact trigger phrase defined in subsection 3. I invoked my right with a handwritten addition as the contract permits. She initialed nothing but she signed, twice in fact. Once on the agreement, once on the transmittal cover. That's binding consent under Oregon contract law. You have zero legal basis to challenge it. Your only options are to pay what you owe, or face a breach of contract lawsuit you'll definitely lose. along with my attorney fees, interest, and potentially punitive damages for bad faith. He opened his mouth, then shut it. His hands, usually so steady during board presentations, were shaking. Raymond never imagined the company would be worth nearly $1 billion, he muttered. Raymond imagined exactly this, I said gently. That's why he insisted on fair market valuation at time of separation with no cap. He knew loyalty should be rewarded in proportion to success, not frozen at startup value. He trusted me to protect the company's integrity. And now you're asking me to betray my own. We'll see about that, he snapped and stormed out, slamming the door so hard a framed photo of the 2012 team retreat fell off the wall. I picked it up, dusted the glass, and returned it to its place. Then I walked back to my desk, sat down, and reopened the Q4 consolidated cash flow statement. There were still reports to finish, transitions to document, systems to hand off, properly, ethically, completely. Because that's who I was. Not a saboteur. Not a grifter. A steward. At 11:47 a.m. my phone buzzed. Stephanie Chen. Zoe, she said, voice sharp with professional satisfaction, I just got off the phone with Cascade's general counsel. They want an emergency meeting this afternoon. Claim there's been a contractual misunderstanding. I almost laughed. Did you tell them there's no misunderstanding? I did. I told them their CEO signed a legally binding document that references a valid, recorded employment contract. That the phrase, complete settlement of obligations, is a defined trigger. That handwritten amendments, when signed by both parties, are enforceable under Oregon Revised Statutes Section 72.2030 and common law precedent. And that if they're looking for a compromise, the only number on the table is $36 million, plus interest. What did they say? They hung up. Pause. Then, but I'm expecting a lawsuit by end of business today. They'll try to get a declaratory judgment that the clause is void. Unconscionable. Outdated. Whatever legal flimsy argument buys them time. He was right. At 3:32 p.m. a process server in a navy blazer approached my cubicle. Not even my office, because they still hadn't promoted me, handed me a manila envelope and nodded respectfully. Inside, Cascade Technologies versus Zoe R. Ellis, filed in Multnomah County Circuit Court. They sought a ruling that Article 14, subsection 3 was unenforceable due to unconscionability, changed circumstances, and lack of mutual consideration. They argued no reasonable company in 2025 would honor a clause written in 2007 for a company worth less than $5 million. They claimed the payout was grossly disproportionate and against public policy. The hearing was set for December 6, 2025. Judge Andrew Pemberton, a former corporate litigator himself, presided. Cascade brought in Marcus Delaney, a senior partner from Hartwell and Price, one of Portland's most elite firms, billing $925 an hour. He wore a bespoke suit and spoke with the practiced condescension of someone who'd never had to balance a general ledger. Your Honor, Delaney began, this clause is a relic, a drafting anomaly that escaped revision for nearly 2 decades. No rational board would permit a single employee, regardless of tenure, to claim 4% of a nearly billion-dollar enterprise upon termination. The disparity is so extreme it shocks the conscience. Furthermore, the company has evolved far beyond the 4-person startup Ms. Ellis joined. The mutual consideration that once justified such a provision no longer exists. Stephanie stood calm in a charcoal pantsuit, hair pulled back, no jewelry, just facts. Your Honor, this clause wasn't an oversight. It was intentional. In 2007, Cascade had no financial infrastructure, no banking relationships, no compliance framework. It had IRS penalties and a failing bookkeeper. Zoe Ellis brought order, credibility, and survival. In exchange, the founders, sophisticated, experienced professionals, granted her founder-equivalent protections. They knew that if the company succeeded, she deserved to share in that success. If it failed, she'd still have her salary and dignity. And for 18 years Cascade benefited. Every audit clean. Every loan approved. Every acquisition smoothly financed. Why? Because Zoe built systems others relied on, and never once invoked her clause, despite multiple CEO transitions, market crashes, and internal power struggles. She waited. She honored her side. Now, a new CEO, hired without reviewing historical contracts, terminates her with a boilerplate severance, includes the trigger phrase and signs a handwritten invocation without reading it. That's not unconscionability. That's negligence. And under contract law, negligence doesn't void agreements. It enforces them. Judge Pemberton took his time. He read Article 14 aloud. Then the termination agreement. Then Zoe's 9-word addition. Pursuant to Article 14, Section 3, employee invokes founder protections and equity vesting at 4% of fair market valuation. He looked up. Counsel, did Ms. Foster sign this termination agreement acknowledging Ms. Ellis's handwritten addition? Yes, Your Honor, Delaney conceded, but she didn't fully understand its implications. Did she read what she was signing? We believe she reviewed it quickly, yes. But... So she had an opportunity to read Ms. Ellis's handwritten addition carefully. She chose not to read it thoroughly. And she signed anyway. That's correct, but Your Honor, she couldn't have known about an 18-year-old contract clause buried in archives. The judge leaned forward, voice low but unmistakable. Whose responsibility is it to understand the terms of employee contracts before terminating those employees? Whose responsibility is it to conduct due diligence before signing legal documents that release all obligations? Silence. Contracts, he continued, are the architecture of trust in business. When a company signs one, it binds not just the present but the future. Ms. Ellis negotiated in good faith. She performed with excellence. She invoked a right that was always there. The company's regret over the financial consequence does not erase the obligation. He ruled from the bench. Article 14, subsection 3 was valid, enforceable and triggered. Cascade owed Zoe Ellis 4% of Cascade's fair market value. An independent appraisal was ordered within 60 days. The valuation took 7 weeks. 3 firms, Lincoln International, Duff & Phelps and Alvarez & Marsal, conducted parallel analyses. They reviewed EBITDA multiples, recent unsolicited acquisition offers, the highest at $975 million, client retention rates, IP portfolio strength and projected cloud services growth. Their consensus, $952 million. 4% of that, $38,080,000. On February 3, 2026, The Wire hit Stephanie's trust account. After 39.6% in federal taxes and 9.9% Oregon state tax, plus a modest charitable deduction, I netted $23.1 million. $23 million. From 9 handwritten words. The fallout was swift. Natalie Foster was fired December 8, 3 days after the ruling. Her LinkedIn now reads strategic advisor, but in tech circles, it's known she hasn't had a real job since. The board called her hiring the costliest error in company history. Not just the payout but the $620,000 in legal fees, the reputational damage, the shattered morale. By March 2026, Jonathan, Elizabeth, and Caroline sold Cascade to a PE firm for $920 million, $32M less than appraised, because my payout had already been deducted from equity value. Jonathan and Elizabeth each walked with $260M. Caroline with $85M. They retired to Napa and Cabo, no longer burdened by the company they built, or the systems that sustained it. The PE firm gutted Cascade within months. Layoffs. Office closures. The Pearl District space, the very room where I'd fixed 9 months of accounting chaos in 2007, became luxury condos with floor-to-ceiling views and $8,000 per month rents. As for me, at 57 I'm financially independent. My portfolio, diversified across municipal bonds, index funds, and a few early-stage compliance tech startups, generates about $700,000 in passive income annually. I consult for founders pro bono, helping them embed fairness into their cap tables and employment agreements. And I teach business law at Portland State. Every semester I tell my students the story of those 9 words. Not to boast but to warn. Because the truth is this: power doesn't always wear a title. Sometimes, it's written in the margin of a termination agreement, in blue ballpoint by someone who read every word, kept every copy and remembered every promise. And sometimes that's enough to change everything.